Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in and to listen to us on this Touchpoint webinar hosted by SKI. Today we have, one second. Yeah. So I have Nandita with me as our guest. Nandita is the social impact lead with ONDC. Nandita is a highly passionate and committed professional working in the development sector for the past 9 years with a specialization in technology for development projects. She has extensively worked with major stakeholders such as central and state governments, non-profits, grassroots organizations, and various social enterprises. Currently, she's working with ONDC as social impact lead, where she's focusing on enabling the non-digital sellers, small businesses, rural enterprises and alike to leverage ONDC network. In the past, she has worked with Barefoot College, consulted with organizations such as World Bank, EY, and PwC. She brings in rich experience on e-governance, women empowerment, agri-technology, skilling, entrepreneurship, with a strong lens of technology for development. Welcome, Nandita. I'll be your host today. I am leading the digital platform practice with Satwa Knowledge Institute, and our core focus is on exploring how digital public goods and digital public infrastructure can be leveraged for social impact. Today, we will focus on understanding and demystifying ONDC. What is ONDC? How can it be leveraged for nano and small businesses? There are three key sections of our webinar today. One is really understanding ONDC, the basics of it, the genesis of it, and what is ONDC really. Second, understanding how small businesses, rural businesses can interact with ONDC. What does it take to be on the network of ONDC? And third is understanding the role of philanthropy, social organizations with ONDC. How can they play a role in ONDC? Before I bring in Nandita, I just wanted to set the context of what is happening in the landscape. Today, we see that many such digital public infrastructure are emerging across financial inclusion, healthcare, agriculture, e-commerce, urban development alike. For example, in financial inclusion, we are very well versed with UPI as a DPI that we now use every day, and it's become second nature. However, it is interesting to note that many such other tools like account aggregator, OCEN, which is Open Credit Enablement Network, are coming up. We are also hearing a lot about Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, how it is trying to digitize the public health ecosystem, and ONDC obviously leading in the digital commerce space. And to put it into perspective, it is very evident that these digital public infrastructure are already getting adopted at scale. For example, $1.5 trillion worth of transactions happened in UPI in 2021, right, across 50 million merchants. $25 billion have been saved, right, by direct benefit transfer, enabled by Aadhaar, the identity digital tool that we use today. Right, so it is very evident that these DPIs are scaling, are getting scaled, are being utilized at a population scale. Today, we want to explore how ONDC will join this bandwagon of digital public infrastructure and what it holds for us. Nandita, hi, welcome to the webinar. Looking forward to having a good conversation with you.
No, thanks a lot, Abhishek, for the for the introduction, for the wonderful introduction, and glad that SKI could really take this up and do a webinar on this to get the understanding across to the larger sort of social sector organizations. I think they have a really huge role to play when it comes to open e-commerce for all that that will really look at getting inclusion in its truest sense. So glad that you all could be here in the webinar. So thanks a lot.
Great.
I think
yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nandita. Yeah.
Sure. All right. So just to kind of bring in the context here, ONDC's genesis had started right after like the first lockdown had set in. It was around August 2020. when basically all the MSMEs were impacted because of the lockdown, right? And more so the undigitized one. There were digitized MSMEs. When I say digitized, I mean their presence was there on e-commerce. However, they were not very well known. And also then there was the entire MSME and the sort of nano and pico sort of sellers, and the OAEs, the own account enterprises that exist today, who were heavily impacted because of the lockdown. We saw that there was a prominence of a few e-commerce giants, which we also know today. However, that was a time when the government started thinking that we have this the unorganized sector also in India, and the organized sector. However, when it comes to e-commerce, not everybody is sort of present there, right? So that's the time when the government said that we need to have a really different approach to now e-commerce, and how do we enable through e-commerce something that is based on the principles of open network, that can really get about population scale inclusion and so on. So that's the time when the government thought of ONDC as an accessible government supported network which connects consumers and traders across various applications and e-commerce platforms. So how does this, just to kind of give you a context of what, how the ONDC network is actually different from a platform, right? So how it happens is that when you work on a particular platform, you have these different aspects of the e-commerce value chain stitched already, which are inherent to the idea of a platform. So the platform that we know today, there is a buyer side interface where, most of people like us, we open our phones and we maneuver through these different applications and choose one of these applications that we want to buy from. There's a seller side angle to it as well, where all of these sellers and the merchants who onboard themselves and their product. So it is also embedded into the platform. So the platform is not only solving about, getting demand generation and market so that people like us can buy. It is also solving for the onboarding of sellers and digitizing catalogs and so on, right? The other thing that it also solves for, apart from the payment gateways and everything, is the logistics part also. So the entities also solve for not only the buyer side, onboarding, the seller side onboarding, as well as the logistics application, which are also onboarded. So what happens in this entire sort of compact sort of built-in platform is that it becomes very difficult for smaller entities to create a platform that can actually compete with a platform of this size, right? Because there's too much to solve. We are stitching many aspects of the value chain, and for one entity to really stitch them all is a challenge. So that's the time when the government said that, hey, we cannot really have a platform approach into thinking about e-commerce. We need a different approach to it. How platforms also work is that they have their own terms and conditions that seller has to abide by. They will have to do the entire sort of market generation aspect also to it. So the government said that, listen, we need to have a different approach to e-commerce, and which moves away from the platform thinking, right? And that is when the open network concept was sort of taken forward. There was also learnings coming from other open network based DPIs that we have already worked on. Abhishek has mentioned the UPI, right? So that's the time when the government said that we will work on different architecture altogether. I will just stay on this slide for a second out there, just to tell you about how what I've tried to explain right now. So on the left hand side is what the platform world that we are existing in right now, right? So you have a platform A, which have, on the left side, you will see the number of sellers, when S1 to S6 is basically the number of sellers. And on the right hand side, you will see the C1 to C6. These are the consumers, right? So the relationship of a platform, from a consumer and a seller point of view, is very one-to-one, right? If you are a seller on platform A, then consumers who have access to platform A then can only be able to see you. However, if you are a seller on platform C, then probably a consumer C1 cannot really go to a platform C, right? They will have to either download the application or know about the fact that that application exists, right? So the government says that, listen, we need to work on two basic principles to enable market participation, to ensure that there is inclusion, to ensure that there is innovation. So that is the concept of, that's when the two principles of unbundling and interoperability were born. So how does this unbundling work? Unbundling, like I explained, right? In a platform world, you have the buyer side application, you have the seller side application, and the logistics side applications, which is sort of combined into one. When you unbundle these three, right, you get a buyer side application, which is just solving the buyer side problem, right? So a buyer side application will typically look at building carts, ensuring my consumers have a good UI UX experience, ensuring that I'm doing some kind of promotions or discounts, basically a lot of demand generation activities as well. That is the job of the buyer side application, right? And then comes the seller side application, which basically looks at onboarding sellers, onboarding products. These could be through a marketplace seller node. It could be an inventory seller node as well, right? So the government said, so with ONDC, what happens is that with the unbundling of a platform, you have the buyer side application, you have the seller side application, and you have the logistics side application, which is now unbundled, right? And through this open protocol, sorry, Abhishek, you have a question?
Go ahead, Ananta. No, go ahead. Please complete and then.
Right, and when we say ONDC, these are actually a set of open protocols. Open protocols in a common layman language are nothing but a common language that is based on these open principles. And when these different applications from the buyer side and the seller side are ONDC compliant, that means they all start talking the same openness language. They are now interoperable as well. So the two principles here are unbundling. So the unbundling means there are multiple seller side applications, there are multiple buyer side applications, and there are multiple logistics side applications, which are now interoperable and talking to each other in the ONDC universe.
So Nandita, if I were to summarize what you're saying, I think one point you are making is that today in the current structure, there are platforms that are providing end-to-end service, right? The buyer experience and the seller experience on one common platform or a portal, so to put it. And the services required, right, for the good transaction to happen in the digital commerce space. So there's an end-to-end single experience, right? So a platform A, for example, that we use today, not to name any company, you would buy the product from there. You would wait for the logistics delivery person to deliver through that platform. And then if you're returning the good or you're giving reviews, etc., every experience is happening on that platform, right? Yeah. However, what the second point that you're making, what ONDC is trying to do is it is identified various services that a digital platform provides and broken it down into different, you can say pieces, let's say. So it's unbundled different services, right? Primarily being the buyer experience and the seller experience, and the third experience being the logistics, right? And connected all of it with the open protocol, which is the ONDC network, so that everybody can exchange or talk to each other via that interface. Is that understanding correct conceptually?
Yes, that understanding is correct. I would also like to just bring about, just kind of summarizing and extending what you've mentioned. So if you see the, the diagram on the right hand side, imagine you are a seller now on the right hand side of the, open network world, right? So if you're a seller on platform X, you will be now visible to all the consumers, regardless of whatever platform they're coming in, right? And vice versa. If you're a consumer on platform P, you are now going to be able to see all the sellers across platforms on the network.
Got it.
So this is potentially the power of the open network construct, where every seller will have a huge amount of visibility. Every buyer will have more choices. There will be unbundled, sort of democratized terms and conditions. People can actually choose the terms and conditions, and those are the kind of aspects which it enables. And also just before I would have mentioned this, I would have said that right now in the e-commerce, the e-commerce penetration actually in India is just about 5%. Right. So there was actually a lot of work to be done. So how do we sort of ensure, that there is greater participation in the market? One of the things that every sort of smaller or a mid-sized entity also suffers from is to really stitch all of these parts of the puzzle. And the great thing about it is that now I just need to solve something that I'm good at. So if I'm a good seller, I need to be a good seller application. I need to join a good seller application. I need to be a good seller. I need to do best with what that possibly can be. right? And vice versa. If I'm a buyer
Yeah.
application, I just solve for the buyer application. I will solve for the buyer experience. And that's why when you have the fortes really playing out, that could really lead to, an inclusion
Got it.
and a greater market participation. Yeah.
So Nandita, I mean, it sounds like a very interesting concept. However, want to take a step back and see how we can relate it to with our physical, like the real world, right? A lot of times imagining this in a digital realm is difficult, right? And just going tangential a little bit, and work with me on this, right? So how I am thinking about it, and help me if this kind of analogy is relatable with ONDC, right? So what I understand fundamentally, what ONDC is trying to do is develop digital public infrastructure, right? Building the infrastructure for digital commerce to happen, right? Really. So for example, let's say we build a highway, right? A road. Its main use case is to go from point A to B. In this case, the goods and the services getting transacted in ONDC, right? However, there are many more use cases that a highway unlocks, right? For example, you can have an industrial complex. Many industries, many factories can set themselves up and use the highway as a way to exchange goods. You can have petrol pumps, right? A Bharat Petroleum pump or Indian Oil or a Reliance. All of them know that because cars are traveling, they will need fuel. Hence, they can provide that value. Similarly, you know that there are many rest places, right? If you go to the Chandigarh highway, there are a lot of dhabas, for example. If you go to the Yamuna Expressway, there are a lot of resting places or more organized. They know that people need food when they're traveling on the highway. Hence, organizations like Subway, KFC, etc., even your local, dhabas, everybody's opening up to provide food as a value-added services, right? And similarly, another point is that highway is not built for government buses. It's built for private vehicles. It's built for taxis, right? It's built for people who are walking or cycling, right? So anybody can travel on that highway,
Right.
similar to this network that you are saying, right? The protocol is the highway, and the goal is obviously to transact goods and services. But because you've unbundled it, anybody can come and add value.
Right.
Is that a fair way to understand this digital public infrastructure and this world you are trying to create in the digital space?
No, I think it's a fair it's a good sort of starting point to get a hang of what ONDC really is. However, to really put everything into context, I think for a start, I think it's great, and I slowly, the complicated sort of questions and sort of everything sort of comes around. But I think that yes, very well put. I think being a highway which will have some kind of guidelines, sometimes some kind of rules to ensure that open access and open travel sort of happens, and we have these multiple entities who have a commerce capability to really sit on the sides on the networks and give those kind of services to people who are actually traveling on the network. And yes, you're right, there will be public buses, private cars, there will be bullock carts, there will be sabziwalas, there will be a bunch of people who are going to be on the network because actually it's for them, right? So yeah, I think that that's a fair. In fact, I think that it'll also foster a lot of innovation. I think that's also happened in the past, right? When we've actually opened up highways, there are many kind of value-added services that people actually get on this particular highway. So yes, it will foster a lot of innovation. A lot of new things will sort of crop in.
Like the point on rules and processes, right? So for example, if we are driving a car on a highway, we need to follow, for example, speeding guidelines, right?
Yeah.
We need to follow lane change guidelines. We need to show indicators. So there are certain behavior patterns that we have to follow, which is similar to what we have to do when we are selling goods digitally, right? So
Yeah.
for example, if let's say a product is broken when it comes, the seller has to either replace it, buy a different product, or refund the buyer, right? Those
Right.
are some of the practices, for example, happening in the digital world,
Right.
right?
Right.
And right.
So I
and
think
and what about, yeah, please go ahead, please go ahead.
no, I mean, I just wanted to highlight on the point that, the rules of, for example, when we talk about the open network, the idea of what is open network, right? So the open network primarily means that if I if I am a buyer and if I go on a buyer application and if I want to buy, say, a black t-shirt, that thing should be multicasted to every seller on the network, right? So every seller network participant on the network, the request should go to them with the same openness. And I should not be discriminatory when I'm sort of reaching out for a particular product. So those are the kind of rules and principles that basically abide transparency, inclusion, equal participation. That's mostly the broad concept. Yes.
Yeah. And we know that UPI is now extensively used, especially in urban areas and more so now in tier 2, tier 3 towns and rural areas. Is there a relationship, or can we understand it from a UPI lens? Because that is a very real, usable example that we are interacting with. So how do you correlate or draw patterns with what UPI has done for financial transactions, peer-to-peer financial transactions, and what ONDC is also trying to emulate in the digital commerce and e-commerce space?
Right. Yeah, no, there are actually great parallels when it comes to UPI and ONDC. But just to kind of give you a context of what things were before UPI, right? Same thing where we are right now, guys. When in the digital payment space, if I had to say send money to Abhishek, and it had to be an order of something, I couldn't be probably sending $50 at the time, but I had to get your entire bank account details. I would have to get your IFSC code, your account number, ensure, like, register you as a beneficiary, and within 24 hours or whatever, I mean, you would be finally registered, and then I would make a particular payment to you with commissions, right? So if it was a different bank altogether. And eventually when UPI came, guys, I mean, ultimately it's a very, it's an ICT system. It's an information and communication technology system. Today, the scene is that if I just, scan this particular barcode, I can actually send you ₹2 in 2 seconds, right? So this is what, UPI really did it. Regardless of whichever bank account you have, you can still, communicate and transact with each other. And that is the same sort of concept that ONDC is getting. Regardless of whichever platform you're in, if the platform is ONDC compliant, we are able to now see each other and transact with each other, right? So if I were to just sort of break down this particular example, right, there's a user A who has an account with SBI, logs in on a particular wallet that basically takes in their account details and so on. And this wallet, through scanning through this little barcode, goes to another wallet called Beam, and to another account called Axis Bank, and to the user B, right? When we talk about, and we'll stay for this on this slide for a little bit. So remember when I mentioned the unbundling of the entire platform world, right? So I was talking about a buyer side application and I was talking about a seller side application, right? These in the ONDC world are essentially the sort of the payment wallets, you could say, right? So when I am a user A, who's registered in a particular in a particular buyer side application, and I want to actually transact with the user B, I can just onboard myself through one of these buyer side applications. So for example, today we have Paytm as a buyer side application. Why Paytm? Because Paytm has a great market penetration. It can give a great user experience. A lot of people know about Paytm, so it's great for buyers to know that I can go through Paytm and access the entire ONDC universe, right? And it goes in the transaction sort of feeds into the seller network participant that based on my particular request. Seller network participants are those which have onboarded sellers. So for example, user B has actually onboarded on a seller network participant. So this is this is how the whole unbundled sort of concept really plays out in the ONDC world.
Great. Nandita, would you like to just quickly share the progress ONDC has made so far, and then we can actually go into how small businesses interact with ONDC. So
Yeah.
please feel free to share your progress, and then we can dive into the experiences.
So in August 2020, as I've mentioned, that was the genesis of ONDC. There was a Bharat Commerce Open Network. It was a paper presented to the Secretary DPIIT at the time. In September to December 2020, we did a pilot launch. I mean, we had become a pilot launch in some sense. So there was a proof of concept which was demonstrated to the DPIIT steering committee, and the open network solution for e-commerce was finally chosen. In December 2021, ONDC was then established as a not-for-profit Section 8 company, and we are supported by public and private institutions. On 29th April 22 was our first order delivered in Bangalore. We did an alpha launch in April 2022, where we did a, rollout in 86 cities, covers new domains to include groceries, food and beverages, and so on. And then we did so alpha launch and beta launch, just to sort of put it out there. Alpha launch is done with like a limited, user base with some functionality when we roll out tech products. Beta launch is again covers a set of pin codes to see if everything. It's a way to sort of test, user testing, different real users sort of testing out capabilities on that particular network. So in October 2022, we did a beta launch and we scaled it up. So we extended in 5 more cities, including Delhi and Bangalore. We had 20 network participants and 600 in plus in the integration stage. So right now, 236 alpha cities are live. Two beta cities are live. We have got 43 network participants and 35,000 sellers and 8 domains live. The network participants, as I mentioned, are the buyer network participants and the seller network participants. The sellers choose a seller network participant to onboard. The buyers choose a buyer network participant to make transactions, to see the sellers. And this also includes a logistics service, logistics network participants as well. We have 6 logistics network participants, and they are the people who are basically looking at hyperlocal delivery, interstate delivery, and so on.
Yeah. Nandita, before we move forward, just quickly browse through the chat window and let me pick up some questions that people are asking, and we can address them. I'll sort of paraphrase some of these questions for you. So I think one of the questions that they've asked is, what if a platform X does not participate on ONDC, right? What happens to that platform X? Like, is it compulsory or is it okay to not participate in ONDC? Do you have a viewpoint?
Yeah. So Nagesh, thanks a lot for the question. If it does not, so the idea is not to participate on ONDC. ONDC is an open protocol. If you want to join the open network as a, you basically become, the platform becomes ONDC compliant. Then we see you in the ONDC universe. If that does not happen, then obviously you can exist in your platform world. That's perfectly okay.
Yeah. And Akshay is asking that you have 6 to 7 logistics partners. Do we have the freedom to choose the logistics player who can deliver the goods?
Yes, Akshay, we do have. Yeah. Yes. So there are multiple permutations and combinations actually. Multiple. So I can, for example, if I'm a seller, I can actually choose to do off-network logistics or on-network logistics. That's completely my choice. There are so you have the complete freedom to choose even your own logistics provider if you have, right?
And does unbundling affect other schemes, services provided by any other platform like Amazon or Flipkart? Is unbundling affecting their routine operations? What happens with unbundling to other platforms?
So see, the thing is that like I mentioned, right now the e-commerce penetration is just about like 5%. The idea would be that when we are about to scale, right, there are going to be multiple network participants who are going to start participating on the network. Now, I mean, I would tell the bigger platforms, it's not about anything. It's just that you are missing the forest for the trees. There is going to be a far more huger sort of participation from the market. There is going to be there's going to be a value add case for getting your products or your services also on the network. So I think it's just about really, thinking about the trees of the forest. I mean, because when we talk about economies for scale, right, if we have a greater market participation, people, when we say that, the bigger pie, there is a very big e-commerce pie, and the idea is to really, wait for its realization. So I think that their participation could obviously get them to do, a business in a different way. To look at their financial models a tad bit differently, but essentially it's just going to be greater participation. So it's just about a matter of time actually.
Yeah, Nandita, before I move to other questions, and for everyone, just wanted to talk about this, right? I think the big burning question is that how do I participate, right? What are the steps? What is that first step I can take as a seller, or if I want to join in as a network participant. So Nandita, would you want to talk about what a seller goes through before it goes live on ONDC, lists its product,
Yeah, yeah,
gets discoverable, etc.?
yeah.
Can you give us a sense of that?
Yeah. So once more, okay. Sorry about the repeating this again, but a seller network participant is a seller application, right, which has the technology capability to integrate itself on the ONDC network. It will give certain functionalities such as an inventory management system, content management system, operation management system. So for example, if I want to become a seller network participant, I will have to have technology capabilities to integrate myself onto the ONDC network. And the application that I create should have content, operations, and inventory management systems, right? So I can either choose to, come on board as an inventory seller node where I am the seller, I am the inventory seller node and I am participating on the network as a network participant, right? So these are the experiences that one needs to get. So now it's not that sellers cannot be a seller network participant. It is just that you will require some kind of operations bandwidth, technology capability, and so on, right? So if you want to, on the left hand side is joining as a network participant. What I told you right now is to become a seller network participant. You can decide to be a buyer network participant also. So if you have an application which has e-commerce capability, or you are interested to make an application that has e-commerce capability, just visit our website, ondc.org, www.ondc.org. There is an NP profile form, which basically tries to understand that, you want to come in as a buyer NP, you want to come in as a seller NP or logistics NP, and where are you based out of, and stuff like that. And then through that particular channel, we will then add you to communication channel like Slack. If you have, because there has to be you will have to integrate your APIs to the ONDC protocol. So there are going to be different environment that one has to traverse to a network participant. So staging environments, you will have a pre-production environment where we'll see the functionalities are working out or not. And this is how your journey would look like.
Yeah.
There are tech briefing calls, and which will sort of take you up to the further steps, right, of integrating as a seller network participant on the network, seller or buyer or logistics network. Sorry, Abhishek, yeah. And
Yeah.
but if you're a seller, right, if you're a seller who is looking to join a network, or you are an organization that supports multiple sellers, who has been working on livelihood development of and entrepreneurship development. So what you can do is that there is again go to the ONDC website. We have an ONDC participants tab. They will tell you the number of seller network participants that exist. You can choose your domain. So for example, if I'm a handicraft vendor, I will choose home and kitchen, right? Or if I'm a handloom seller, I will choose fashion, because that is the category. So these are categories on the network. You can choose the categories. It will give you a list of seller network participants. Now, these are the seller network participants that I would like to onboard myself on, right? Because they will give me the tech capability to onboard myself, onboard my catalog, tell them where my pickup location is, and stuff like that. So I will choose the seller network participants as from the category, and I will choose one, and I will contact them and I'll get onboarded. Obviously, ONDC will help you through this whole process. If you're stuck somewhere, we will ensure that you are connected to the right channels and get onboarded as soon as possible, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Nandita, so
Yeah. Sorry.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry. I'll maybe just couple of questions on in the similar context that have come. One is, from a compliance point of view, are there specific compliance, for example, maybe having GST or having a registered business? Are there certain compliances that a small business have to cater to become eligible to be part of ONDC?
So Abhishek, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll couple it up with another question is on the data protection law, right? So from a data privacy and security point of view, how is ONDC sort of protecting the data, or its point of view on data, right? Given that the law right now doesn't exist, and a lot of data is getting exchanged through the ONDC protocol, right, between seller and buyer platforms, like you discussed. So what is the current point of view of ONDC on the data protection?
Right. So, on your first point, I'd like to say that the laws of the lands are what is applicable even on ONDC. If you're a seller who is looking to, onboard himself or herself, and you're looking to, you're creating a product that is not hyper local or it's interstate, then you would need to have a GST. Even if it's within the state right now, the exemption has not really come about. The exemption will be there from October, where if you have a turnover of less than 40 lakhs and you want to you want to exchange your goods within a state, then the exemption will be in effect. We are waiting for that to happen. However, you would require a GST to onboard yourself on the network. However, if you are a seller who is coming through an entity, like for example, if there is an NGO which wants to onboard as a seller, and it is it is supporting X number of sellers, the seller on record will be the NGO, and then will be able to support all of these organizations. For example, there's a Chitkara Foundation. It has a popular name of Creo. So they have onboarded as a seller, and they support about 800 artisans. So that's one of the construct. However, you have a Mandeshi Foundation, wherein they support few lakh of self-help groups. We have got a few hundreds already onboarded, and they've got their own GST. So that's there. I think when it comes to data, Abhishek, ONDC right now, it does not really take care. I mean, does not really hold any particular data. It's the repository of basically the seller IDs and the seller names is what we have, just to ensure that these are registered sellers on the network. That's the kind of data exchange. We have a data exchange sort of policy, which is now being drafted to look at how do we ensure that practices are not happen. However, in a democratized e-commerce world, you should ensure, I mean, one thing will be ensured, it is that all the buyer applications will not have data of all the buyers on the network, because again, it's democratized. And similarly, the same thing will happen to the seller network participants. The seller network participants will have the data of their own sellers because they're onboarding them. But this sort of aggregated one platform, ensuring that to basically whitelist their own products, no disintermediation, and those aspects will not happen. So yeah, and one of the other things that I mean, although it doesn't pertain directly to the data question, but however, I as a seller who has onboarded through a seller network participant, the seller network participants should have the right to give me the business insights. They should tell me how my product is doing, where is it going, how I'm making. So those are the things that are defined on the network.
Got it. So Nandita, one of the main benefits talked about is the whole idea of market linkages and ONDC unifying the markets, right? And the discoverability of the business is one of the key value proposition. And I'm also trying to sort of club all the questions on the branding, the marketing part of things, right? From a small business point of view. Can you tell us how ONDC enhances discoverability? We have like I've sort of given a workflow, but do you want to walk through how when a product is live on ONDC, how that is getting better discoverability, better market access, or more number of buyers are getting visibility of it? That is, I think, one question that people are asking. And second, also there is a skewed, where less buyer platform than more sellers are there, right? So how do you sort of come on top, right? There's so much competition right now that more products are there and less places, less real estate of the product to be displayed, right? So how does that balance sort of happen? Can you give us a sense of both?
Right. So, so right now we have about 7 buyer applications who are onboarded on the network. They are on the, few of them. So I'll just give you the names. So Meesho, there's Paytm, PhonePe, Craftsvilla, IDFC First Bank. So, Spice Money. So there are all of these different entities. So there are a few banks, there will be a few telecom players who are looking to onboard, right? So these are these buyer applications. They will give an integrated sort of buyer experience. So if a seller has onboarded through a seller network participant onto the network, through any of these buyer applications who have enabled that particular category, right? So if everybody has enabled fashion category, all the applications, through any of these applications, I can just go and I can find that seller, right? Now, how this whole thing really plays out is that if like a buyer onboards onto a, opens up a buyer application, which most probably exists on your phones, and looks through the product that they're looking for, right? Like you've mentioned, right? So based on, so the buyer applications, knowing that they have to give that kind of seamless buyer experience to their sellers, will give them different filters, right? So your filters could be, I want a 2-day delivery. I want something that's not so far away, something that's in close proximity. I might look at a bunch of filters that which will be suitable for my choice. So the buyer application will essentially give that entire filter, and me being a buyer will be able to sort of search for the product that I'm looking for, right? Knowing that the buyer is not allowed to do any kind of discriminatory practices, they will ensure that the visibility of all sellers is there. However, what comes on your screen, in the top half, at the bottom half, is something that is really decided by the buyer itself. So the buyer decides a filter of how to really go about it. And then that seller, so once my sort of product search goes, it is webcasted, so it is multicasted to all the seller network participants on the network. So like I said, right, if I'm looking for a black ikat shirt, right, so it will essentially be multicasted to all the seller network participants who have onboarded fashion sellers, who might have something like this. And based on the availability of the product and the choice that the buyer is looking for, the seller network participant will respond with their query that I have one, right? And now on the buyer side, because the buyer is going to give a good buyer experience to the seller, so it is going to be their prerogative on how and what filters do they give. Now, right now we have 7 buyer applications, right? That essentially means that a particular seller who has onboarded onto the network will have visibility of across about 50 million customers, right? That's huge. That's the visibility that this open network is giving. Vice versa, from a buyer's point of view, I don't have to maneuver through 5 platforms. I can just go through one of the platforms which exists on my phone and look at all the sellers universe, right? So I think that is the main sort of value add. And there are these, combinations, like the seller can decide that, hey, I want to make my product non-returnable, or I will be able to deliver my product in 15 days. This is my condition. So every seller has the freedom to put in their particular condition. The buyer, based on how they feel that they want the product, will have to put in their condition. Whatever is a match is then displayed on the buyer application. The buyer application creates filters to give a unified, seller buying experience to the buyer.
Got it. So Nandita, if I were to just summarize, right, I think the key point you're making is that as a seller, today I have to onboard my products onto multiple platforms. In ONDC's case, one seller app, if you've set up your digital shop, your products are getting broadcasted to all the buyer places, right? I think that is one point you're making. Second point you're making is that the filtering criteria enables more sharper or let's say high quality buyer in the sense, right? So people looking at your product are interested at least in that category and domain. It's not like you search for buying a biscuit for your daily need and you get a handicraft product, right? So you're sort of getting more sharper sort of buyers who are looking for your kind of product, right? And on the other side, for the buyer's experience also, he doesn't have to visit. Let's say for today, I need to visit Amazon for a certain type of product. I go to Myntra for a certain type of product. That sort of experience gets unified by one buyer application and this multicasted capability.
Right. No, absolutely. I think that, right now we have a different application for mobility. We have a different application for travel. We have a different application for, buying, household goods. We have a different application for buying grocery. So how can I, as a buyer, really get a unified experience? I just need to, check in, buy a suitcase if I want to, buy a, flight ticket if I need to, if I'm traveling somewhere. I need a language course. Essentially, we'll be looking at services on the network eventually, in the next few months. So how do I basically avail all of these things, at the same place? And how are these multiple, buyer applications ensuring that, we give the right kind of experience? So there's a lot of market participation. There is a competition. People are trying to get better at the experience that they create for their customers. and vice versa, right? Even from the
Yeah.
seller side, that's the same sort of aspect. Yes.
One of the very interesting, just picking up on one of the questions asked by Mamta, is these are small businesses, right? And going digital is a kind of an investment they're making. So what are some of the costs associated with for a seller onboarding onto ONDC? Can you give us a sense of the economics of somebody onboarding themselves onto ONDC?
So right now, for example, I mean, I think Mamta, your question is more from a supporting organization point of view, is what I understand. I think when we talk about, say, just a seller to onboard, a seller doesn't really need to pay for anything. Seller just needs to, we're working on this chatbot as well, and the phone numbers will be available on the website. The seller should be able to say that, hey, I'm here and I'm selling this. I need the right NP to connect and onboard with. You will have a broadcast of a few numbers. You will just have to connect to the right kind of NP that you want to choose based on your own terms and conditions. And the commission that they would charge. So you can have that sort of question, and then you can get yourself onboarded, right? These seller network participants are the one which are actually training the sellers on e-commerce behavior. And again, it's upon the seller or the supporting organization, which is the seller NP that the sellers would want to choose to onboard through, right? So, for example, if I'm a seller and if I'm looking to onboard, right, I would want some support on, say, digital cataloging. So ideally, I can create that myself. There's nothing that doesn't say that, you can't really create like a bad image or whatever, but there will be essentially, they're looking at, some kind of minimum quality or whatever. People are, taking up pictures right now and, getting themselves onboarded. When it comes to your pickup location, you can sort of put that. When it comes to training on doing e-commerce behavior, that's something that your NPs are getting. So I think this is, so it doesn't really cost you anything. But I think that when I'm not sure, Mamta, if your question is more from a supporting organization, like a social, social sector sort of an organization, which is looking to onboard really small sellers on the network. I think one of the things that we did, so for example, in Mandeshi Foundation was, they have, a network about 8 lakh women-led entrepreneurs. And when we went there, it was the Mandeshi Foundation which said that, listen, we can do this onboarding, in a much more efficient and much more quality sort of a way. So the NPs can definitely facilitate the seller network participants. However, what they did is that they actually trained a cohort of 6 women at Mandeshi Foundation. Right. So 2 of them will look at doing digital catalogs. So they were trained photographers who could now just set up a small DIY sort of a setup, look at, product photography. There were 2 ladies who would now look at content generation. So for example, if I want to describe a bottle, for example, so how would I, write that out like creatively? Then I think the third aspect was to onboard the seller details. So I think that this is how, some of the organizations have really taken a stride. Kudumbashree did it, but Kudumbashree is a far more sort of mature organization who got the bunch of self-help groups products onboarded onto the network. So we've got Kudumbashree as well. We've got a bunch of Kanchipuram weavers who are onboarded onto the network. I think I would like to touch upon that example. So SIDBI as an organization supported that entire cause. And what we did is that we actually met the weavers. The weavers wanted to onboard. It was a digital cataloging, which the weavers and, they had the, their children who were, who were very well, well versed with the whole mobile phone world and everything. So they took some really good photographs of these saris, got them onboarded, had an idea about the pricing. We had to work with the weavers directly to understand what is the pricing, because they were not really sure about how much they charge, because it was the first time that they were doing commerce to a real customer, and let alone be a digital one, right? Because it was the whole, middlemen, sort of a layer that's always there. So I think that ways, it's just different models are really emerging from the ground. Supporting organizations that's saying that we will support our sellers because we've been working on livelihood development and stuff like that. So I think it really depends on which model you're looking at. But yeah, I hope I answered that question, although there is no direct answer to that.
Yeah. Nandita, would you like to walk us through how a transaction happens in ONDC? Like, can you give us a sense of how it is different from a Amazon or Flipkart that a lot of us are used to with ONDC, right? And maybe using a Kirana store example, right? What what happens when me as a seller or as a buyer buys a commodity or a service from
Right.
ONDC?
Right. So as you can see on the left side, you will see multiple logos of different organizations. The idea is to say that actually things are unbundled and that there are a lot of people who are now participating in that entire open network philosophy to make a transaction successful. So there could be multiple combinations that could really play out. So here we're going to look at an experience or a workflow of Vijay, who is looking to buy Atta, right? So Vijay logs on to a buyer application and searches for options to buy Atta. So here what we are looking at is that, at one point of time, we should actually look at WhatsApp being a buyer application as well. But now we can really dwell on the example of a Paytm, say, for example. So Vijay logs on to a buyer application and searches for options to buy Atta. The gateway right now, so the gateway has a multicasting sort of functionality. It will check the multi-domain registry and broadcast search to retailer seller nodes, right? Retailer seller nodes are your seller network participants, right? The following search results are displayed to Vijay to choose from, right? He will get Gupta Kirana store with INR 50 without delivery. Then the other option he will get will be Big Basket. Now that will be fulfilled by Modern Kirana store with INR 150 with delivery, right? So Vijay places order for Atta through Gupta Kirana store without delivery. So he doesn't want to go to the inclusive delivery one. He goes without delivery, right? So Vijay searches for delivery services. Right now, after I search for, I select, Vijay selects the Atta from the Gupta Kirana store. He will now have access to the now multiple logistic service providers who will fulfill this particular order. So Vijay searches for delivery services. The gateway now again will check the multi-domain registry and broadcast search to all the delivery seller nodes, right? So Vijay is informed that Dunzo will deliver from Gupta Kirana store at INR 50 and load share at INR 70 in his pin code, right? So there are Dunzo and there's load share. They are both, hyper local delivery providers on the network, right? Then Vijay selects Dunzo for delivery. So Vijay is told through the consumer app, the buyer app, that he can make a payment through UPI or cash on delivery. Vijay makes a payment of INR 50 through UPI via VPA for Atta from Gupta Kirana store and 50 for delivery via Dunzo. So as you can see, this entire unbundled sort of way where, the buyer is now able to choose from multiple applications who are providing the same product at different prices, and then also looking at if he would want the logistics cost to be included or excluded, and he will then have the ability to then choose what are the other options that he can choose from the logistics service providers.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway is that the choice that ONDC as a network will offer, right? Going back to the road example, when I am traveling in my car, I can choose from where I want to fill my petrol, right? I can choose Bharat Petroleum, I can choose Reliance, or I can choose Shell as well. The choice is for both the buyer and the seller, I think, is what, and that is what unbundling sort of enables, right? I think that's one of the key point that you're making. I think one question here, and then we'll move to the role that organization in the social impact space can make. Is one of the participant is asking how do you decide ordering a listing of orders or listing of products based on search? Who decides, right? Does the buyer platform decide? Does the seller platform? Does ONDC? Who is deciding who sees what kind of product? Yeah.
So it's the
What is the
buyer.
algorithm? Yeah.
No. So there's no algorithm. To see the buyer applications, it's in their best interest to ensure that there are more buyers coming onto the network, right? So they will want to give a seamless sort of buyer experience to their sellers. So if they have an idea about what exactly the seller is looking for based on the filters that they create, they can have that. They cannot do discrimination, that's for sure, but how they really project these sellers is a function of what the buyer is looking for, and the buyer application facilitates.
Got it. So there are a lot of questions. So some of them we'll try and answer them offline, just to save time. I think one big question that a lot of people are asking is, how do you handle, how will we handle grievances, complaints, returns, refunds, like the whole order fulfillment part of the journey, right? We've talked about discover, we've talked about how orders can happen. I think just quickly covering the last part of the return, the grievances, etc., and then we'll move to what role different organizations can play. So can you quickly
So the
shed
same
light?
world, right? So the way it's happening
Yeah.
even so so there is an entire IGM system that we are creating. We are doing a few use cases and we're piloting it out. And the way it works is that in the earlier world, it was always like it was the seller who suffered the most, right? Product kharab hai, product ka ye nahi aaya, wo nahi aaya, all of that was there, right? Now when there's a seller who decides that, boss, I don't want to make this product returnable, or I want to ensure that this delivery the return happens within 5 days. So I think that in itself is a construct that the seller is able to now place, that these are my terms and conditions that I will run by. And I think that and the way the whole IGM works is that to basically look at, if it's a product level issue, then it's the seller, it'll be a return cost to the seller. The return cost will have to be borne by the seller. However, you should know, like for example, in this particular example of Vijay, it was a buyer who actually paid for the logistics, right? And that's the same thing. But I think when it comes to return logistics, when it's about the seller, the product per se, on whatever terms and conditions that the seller has listed it by, the return will happen to the seller. If it's a logistics related issue, then the logistics company will have to bear the amount. So I think that same sort of construct that works in today's world will be looked at. I think one thing which is going to be fundamentally very different is going to be a reputation ledger. What we're doing right now is we're creating a reputation which is an all network wide reputation. So if you know that in the current platform world, there was a lot of sort of paid reviews that happened, a bunch of other things, right? And if today, if you are a seller on, say, one of the mobility applications, if you are a driver on one of the mobility applications, and tomorrow you want to go on to the other mobility application, your reputation starts from zero, right? So on the network, this entire reputation will be portable, right? So if you're not happy with one of the seller network participants that you've onboarded on, but you've actually made a substantial amount of credentials, you can choose to be on a different seller network participant, and your entire network wide reputation will be ported on the other side. So that's how it'll work. And I think when it comes to aspects such as paid reviews and blah blah. I think that entire, because of the entire objective of the unbundling, right? The buyer is looking at the buyer application is looking for the buyers. So you will not that in stitching that entire experience will actually be a very difficult thing for you to do. So if you are a genuine customer who was happy with the product, you can regardless of whichever seller network participant that they've onboarded on, you can actually go and give your reviews. Right.
Yeah. So a couple of things before we move. Sorry, Nandita. One is some of the questions we've not been able to answer. We'll definitely get back to the participants offline over email and respond to them. Second is we have a barcode here on the top right for you to read some of the knowledge we've sort of developed building use cases of ONDC for social sellers, especially SHG women, small businesses, Kirana stores, right? So please do explore that. Before we end, Nandita, would you want to just quickly talk about what role some of the social organizations, philanthropy, CSR, right, NGOs, what role do you see them playing in catalyzing this entire digital public infrastructure that is coming up, right? And just putting out the caveat, what I understand right now is that it's still very nascent, right? It's probably where UPI was in 2016 or 15, right? And it's yet to take off. It's a long journey, right? And definitely a lot of progress has happened. There's a lot of hype and obviously a lot of discussion in the mainstream media, but a long road ahead, right? In terms of developing the infrastructure, right, for commerce. With that said, where do you see this philanthropy playing a role? The NGOs, etc. Can you share quickly what role are you seeing them play, and then we can quickly
yeah, I think
kind
so.
of end.
So first of all, I think that the philanthropy spaces and the social sector organizations have a huge role to play. I think it is primarily the small sellers, or the skilled artisans, or so as to say that India incorporated is the entire pie that we're really missing out on, and that's something that platforms earlier were not able to tap on because it was a complex problem to solve. So I think that right now is a good time because there are multiple options to onboard from, and a huge sort of visibility that a small seller is getting. So I think it's a really good time for all of these developmental organizations should participate. I think when it comes to participation, again, we don't have one formula, but there are multiple things that one can do, right? So if I'm talking about especially like a tech for impact sort of an organization that looks at technology for development sort of an organization, they can actually look at creating open source sort of interoperable and plug and play softwares that could actually support the onboarding of really small sellers, where the UI and UX could be extremely simplified. It could be language agnostic. It could look at cataloging as a service, where I'm able to just sort of through an AI system take a picture and it will tell me the description of the product, where is it from, so basically attributes such as that. So that could really help in the population scale sort of onboarding of really small sellers on the network. I think that's definitely one. When we talk about supporting local and inclusive business models, there are multiple developmental organizations who have been working with artisans, weavers, self-help groups, farmer producer organizations, and the likes to basically work with them on livelihood development, entrepreneurship building. So the idea would be, how do we create sustainable market linkages for these entities, right? Because the way we've been doing it, either entities have opened up their own e-commerce platform, which a lot of us really don't know of. But the idea would be that how do we ensure that we tap onto this open network to create these sustainable market linkages, where these sellers will have like a larger visibility, more so through this entire e-commerce process and behavioral change. How will that improve my own processes? If I'm a weaver and I've been weaving again to middlemen for all of these years, and now when I'm suddenly on e-commerce, what will it entail, right? I mean, there will be some amount of sense. I will understand that these are the sarees that really sell well. These are sarees which I need to sort of work on, so it's going to be a bunch of process improvement that's also going to come, and a lot of business acumen that will also come with me onboarding. In fact, most of the craft persons and artisans, and it's quite sad thing, right? It's like beautiful like handmade products. It's only these offline fairs and bazaars that we have to go and find these products, and we really don't know when will we sort of see them again. So I think that they will really help in creating that sort of sustainable market linkage. I think when and the third and a very important aspect is the capacity building aspect, right? Many NGOs and these grassroots and ground level organizations have been working on some phenomenal capacity building and awareness programs. How can we really leverage the construct of e-commerce and open network to say that what are the e-commerce etiquettes that might be now required for me? I was an offline seller. I used to sell in fairs. I used to sell it to the middlemen. But now when I need to really become visible as a seller on an e-commerce where people, all over India and across, by the way, we are going exports also. A lot of handicraft and handloom market will have like a pull from the export market. So how do I ensure that I'm able to, learn the different e-commerce etiquettes, know what it's when my how do I do payment and reconciliation, I'm insured. So that entire capacity building piece is also something that's extremely important. So
great. Thank you so much, Nandita. I think the conversation is very insightful, and I, after this conversation, I think one understanding what ONDC is doing, like how it's trying to build a highway, right, is very critical for us to understand, and understanding the role I can play, right, once that infrastructure is up, right, from that point of view. I think that is something very critical that I've kind of taken away. We've not been able to address all the questions, but we'll definitely take it offline. I hope for all the participants, the webinar was insightful. We've just, I think, scratched the surface. There's a lot to explore in ONDC and the work that is happening. Thank you so much, Nandita, for your time. Thank you for taking out time from a busy schedule. I hope it was helpful for everyone. And we'll be in touch through email to respond to some of the questions.
Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone,
thanks
for
everyone
joining in.
here. Thank you.
Thank you.